Round the World Lit Audio. Animal Farm by George Orwell. Episode 2. Chapters 4 to 7. Full narration script. Channel intro. Welcome to Around the World Lit Audio, the greatest novels ever written, from every corner of the world, in English. New chapter every week. Free to listen. Chapter recap. In Episode 1, Old Major called a meeting in the barn, and described the logic of animalism. Man takes everything. The animals produce everything. The solution is rebellion. He taught them beasts of England and died 3 nights later. The pigs developed his teachings. The rebellion came in June. Not as a plan but as the thing that happens when accumulated endurance reaches its limit. The 7 commandments were painted on the barn wall. The harvest was the best the farm had ever seen. The milk disappeared. Nobody mentioned it. Napoleon moved quietly. Episode 2. Chapters 4 through 7. Chapter 4. Mr. Jones tries to retake the farm. By autumn the news had spread. It spread in the way that news spreads among animals, through the pigeons that Snowball sent out across the surrounding countryside, singing beasts of England to the animals on every farm they passed, carrying the message that Animal Farm existed and that the animals had done what Old Major had said could be done. The neighboring farmers, Mr. Pilkington of Foxwood and Mr. Frederick of Pinchfield, watched with the specific anxiety of men who understand that an idea, once demonstrated to be possible, is considerably more dangerous than an idea that remains theoretical. Their own animals were becoming difficult. Cows kicked over pails. Dogs refused to fetch. The song Beasts of England was heard on farms where it had no business being heard. Mr. Jones tried to take the farm back. He came in October with his men, and with Mr. Frederick and Mr. Pilkington's men, and with their guns, advancing on the farm from the front gate. Snowball had studied military tactics, had read Caesar's campaigns, found in the farmhouse, and had prepared a defense based on the principle of feigned retreat. The animals retreated. The men came through the gate, confident now, following. The pigeons descended on their heads. The geese pecked at their ankles. Snowball charged with the sheep and the horses and Boxer. The men fired. Snowball was wounded. A sheep was killed. But the men were surrounded, attacked from all sides simultaneously, confused, overwhelmed by the mass of animals, moving with a coordination that Mr. Jones had not anticipated. The men ran. The animals had won. They found a gun in the farmhouse. They fired it twice a year, on the anniversary of the rebellion and on the anniversary of the Battle of the Cowshed, as they called it. These were the 2 great festivals of Animal Farm. Boxer had a moment on the battlefield that troubled him. In the fight he had struck a stable boy with his great hoof. The boy lay still in the mud. Boxer said, "I have no wish to take life, not even human life." He stood over the boy with an expression of distress. Snowball said, "The only good human being is a dead one." Boxer said, "I do not wish to have killed anyone." The boy recovered and ran away. But Boxer was not entirely comforted. Snowball was voted the hero of the Battle of the Cowshed. Napoleon seconded the motion. The guns were fired. The medals were awarded. The animals were content. Chapter 5. The Windmill. The great controversy of the winter was the windmill. Snowball had designed it. He had spent weeks in the farmhouse, which the pigs had moved into, for administrative convenience, in a development that Squealer had explained was entirely consistent with the 7 commandments, studying an old book of Julius Whymper's he had found there, covered in sketches and diagrams of a windmill that could generate electricity for the farm. His plans were elaborate and ingenious. He drew them on the floor of the barn. Every Sunday the animals gathered to look at them. The windmill would power machinery that would reduce the animals' working hours to 3 days a week. It would heat the stalls. It would pump water. It would light the barn. It would transform the life of Animal Farm in ways that were almost impossible to imagine from their current position. Napoleon said it was nonsense. He said it in the way he said most things, flatly, finally, without argument or explanation. He walked up to the plans, examined them briefly, and urinated on them. The animals were divided. Those who favored the windmill organized under Snowball. Those who opposed it looked to Napoleon. Napoleon, meanwhile, had the puppies. The puppies he had taken from their mothers at birth and raised in secret, in a loft that could only be reached by a ladder, were grown now. They were enormous, 9 of them, fierce and obedient, trained since birth to recognize Napoleon as the authority to which they were entirely devoted. The Sunday when the windmill decision was to be voted on, Snowball made his finest speech. He spoke about the windmill, about electricity, about what it would mean for every animal on the farm. He spoke with the passionate conviction of someone who has designed something he believes in completely, and wants everyone else to believe in it too. The animals were moved. They were going to vote for the windmill. Napoleon made a small sound. The 9 dogs burst through the door. They chased Snowball out of the barn, out of the farm, across the field and through the hedge, and away into the world beyond. He was never seen on Animal Farm again. There was a long silence. Then Squealer spoke. He explained that Napoleon, who had never wanted the windmill, had now decided that the windmill would be built. He explained that Napoleon's opposition had been a strategic maneuver, designed to eliminate the disruptive element of Snowball, who had been, as Napoleon had always suspected, an agent of the humans. He explained that the windmill was Napoleon's idea. Some of the animals thought they remembered things differently. Squealer said, "Surely, comrades, you do not want Jones to come back." Nobody wanted Jones to come back. The pigs moved into the farmhouse and slept in beds. The Fourth Commandment, which said no animal shall sleep in a bed, was checked. Some of the animals thought they remembered it saying something slightly different from what it said now, but the letters were clear enough and they could not be sure of their own memory. Squealer assured them they were misremembering. The windmill was begun. Chapter 6. More commandments change. The animals worked through the winter on the windmill. It was harder than the harvest. The stone had to be blasted and hauled, and the hauling was done by horses and the blasting organized by the pigs, and the work was cold and sustained and the rations were reduced and the hours were long. But the animals worked because they were working for themselves, because the farm was theirs, and the windmill would be theirs, and the electricity it produced would heat their stalls and light their barn. Napoleon announced that Animal Farm would begin trading with the neighboring farms. Some of the animals were troubled by this. They thought they remembered a resolution, passed in the early days of the rebellion, that no animal should ever engage in trade with humans or use human money. They went to look at the wall where the resolutions were kept. There were no resolutions on the wall. There had never been any resolutions on the wall. Squealer told them they were mistaken. Mr. Whymper, a solicitor, became the agent through whom Napoleon conducted his business. He came to the farm every Monday. He walked through the farm. He saw the animals working. He saw the pigs giving orders. He reported to the outside world that Animal Farm was functioning normally, that the animals were well fed, that there was nothing alarming to report. The pigs began drinking whiskey. The Fifth Commandment, "No animal shall drink alcohol," was checked. It appeared, upon close inspection, to say no animal shall drink alcohol to excess. Some of the animals were not entirely sure this was what it had originally said. Squealer explained that they were suffering from a failure of memory, which was common among the lower animals. Mr. Frederick and Mr. Pilkington were both interested in buying timber from Animal Farm. Napoleon played them against each other, hinting to each that he was about to sell to the other, until the moment arrived to sell and the price was right. He sold to Frederick. Frederick's banknotes turned out to be forgeries. And then Frederick's men came with guns and blew up the windmill. They came in the night and the explosion was heard across the farm, and the animals came out to see what had happened and found the windmill, months of labor, the great project, the thing that was going to reduce their working hours, and heat their stalls, in a pile of rubble. Napoleon said, "We will build it again." Boxer said, "I will work harder." Chapter 7. Confessions and Executions. In the bitter winter that followed, the animals were hungry. The harvest had been poor. The rations were reduced. The pigs and dogs always had enough. The needs of the pigs and dogs were recognized to be greater than those of the other animals, for administrative reasons that Squealer could explain at length. But the cows and horses and sheep went to bed hungry on more nights than they could count. Napoleon arranged a transaction with Whymper. The grain bins were filled with sand and covered with a thin layer of actual grain at the top, for Whymper to see when he visited. Whymper reported to the outside world that the grain bins were full. The hens were told they must surrender their eggs. The hens refuse. They smashed their eggs rather than surrender them. Napoleon cut their rations to nothing. 5 days later the hens submitted. Then Snowball appeared. Not physically. Snowball was gone, would never return. But Squealer reported that Snowball was responsible for everything. The loss of the windmill, Snowball had sabotaged it. The poor harvest, Snowball had been seen in the fields at night, destroying crops. Every difficulty, every setback, every problem on Animal Farm, Snowball was behind it. He crept through the farm under cover of darkness. His agents were everywhere. He might be among them right now. The animals looked at each other. Napoleon called a meeting. At the meeting, the dogs suddenly seized for pigs, who had disagreed with Napoleon at various points, and pinned them to the ground. The pigs, in the grip of the dogs, began to confess. They confessed to collaboration with Snowball. They confessed to contact with Pilkington and Frederick. They confessed to things that had not happened, and could not have happened, and that they described with the specific thoroughness of people who have been told what to confess and are confessing it. When they had finished confessing, they were executed. Then 3 hens confessed to plotting against Napoleon and were executed. Then a goose confessed and a sheep confessed and several other animals confessed and were executed. The remaining animals stood in the farmyard, and looked at the pile of bodies and felt something they could not name. They thought about the Sixth Commandment. They went to look at it, on the barn wall. It said, No animal shall kill any other animal without cause. Some of them thought they remembered it having said something slightly different. They were not sure enough of their own memories to say so. They began to sing Beasts of England. It was the song they always sang when they needed to feel that what the farm had been, at the beginning, was still what it was now. Squealer told them that Beasts of England had been abolished. Comrade Napoleon had decreed that Beasts of England was no longer appropriate. The rebellion was over. The song had served its purpose. It would be replaced with a new anthem, composed by the pig minimus, which was about the glory of Animal Farm, rather than the aspirations of a future that had already arrived. The animals stood in the cold farmyard. They did not sing Beasts of England. They did not know what to sing. Chapter transition. You have reached the end of episode 2 of Animal Farm, by George Orwell. Chapters 4 through 7. Snowball is gone. The executions have happened. The 7 commandments have been quietly changed. Beasts of England has been abolished. And the animals, standing in the cold farmyard, are beginning to have a feeling they cannot quite name, a feeling that things are not as they were, that something has been lost that they cannot precisely identify because the language available to describe it has been taken away. In episode 3, the final episode, the pigs walk on 2 legs. The commandments become one. And Orwell writes the most devastating final line in political fiction. Episode 3 is available next week. Subscribe to Around the World Lit Audio so you never miss a chapter. A new episode arrives every week.